Hi, I'm author Valerie Estelle Frankel, and I'm here to look at the steampunk superheroes we have out there. As you can see, we have quite a lot of them. Well, this arguably starts off with the most memorable, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. What if we had a Justice League style team up, but they were in Victorian England, and we might as well throw in all the memorable characters we can think of, like Captain Nemo and Mina Murray from Dracula and the Invisible Man, and off we go. The film arrived in 2003, and the superhero film boom that we're experiencing right now was just beginning. So they were trying not to identify it firmly as a superhero movie, and we don't see the hardcore costumes and so forth, but we were definitely emphasizing superhero by giving everybody a power and teaming them all up to go save the world or perhaps destroy it. This one did not make Mina the hero of the story, but instead Alan Quatermain, because he's Sean Connery. So we were pushing the cool heroes, but we were also helping to strengthen current franchises like the X-Men. The movie got mixed reviews, but it's fun, and it's definitely steampunk superhero. And we have comics, so many comics. Bill Willingham of Fables gives us Legendary, a steampunk adventure with the Phantom, Vampirella, the Green Hornet, Flash Gordon, Red Sonja, and Zorro, but all reimagined as steampunk characters, and out we go. Girl Genius is absolutely a favorite, especially on the West Coast where we get to see the creators so often. Clolios created a mad scientist inventor. She's fun and delightful. She discovers she has the powers of the legendary heroes described in their world, and there's a tyrant that she can overthrow with all her cool inventions, and he's got kind of a cute son, so there she goes. She's swashbuckling, she's inventing, she's letting the ancient powers take over as she makes such amazing gadgets. This is a web comic, but it's also been collected into comic book collections, and there are even a few novels. It was called Gaslamp Fantasy because it came out just before steampunk, but it has absolutely found a beloved place in the genre, and it's huge. Lady Mechanika is out at private investigating, and she's got her pistols. She is part machine, and she's got a great mystery in what made her this way, and out she goes with her powers to right the world, of course. Athena Voltaire was fun, as so many people keep asking and have for basically a century, where is the female Indiana Jones? Who's going to make one? Well, here she is. She battles Nazis and the pre-Nazi fool society that's obsessed with finding ancient artifacts that can have magic powers, and this sounds awfully familiar. She's a widowed stunt pilot, she's a sharpshooter, she can fence. She learned it all in Hollywood, but she is absolutely capable of going out and kicking butt in real life. So, as with Indiana Jones, she's got a magical item to find each time, and out she goes. There are a lot of indies, which is not surprising because steampunk started on the fringes as a costuming, as an aesthetic, as something we could add to other franchises. So when people started crying for steampunk comics, we started seeing a lot of little guys speak out. We've got the Jekyll Island Chronicles. We also see a lot of taking on the Victorian superheroes like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or the Invisible Man, because guess what? They're past copyright and we can adapt them and play with them. We also see this stuff being linked to so much of American history. Woodrow Wilson, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and his inventions. Sure, why wouldn't they go out and get a superhero team, and out they go. Five Fists of Science. The Five Fists of Science, yes, we have Tesla front and center. We've got the steam engines of Oz, because if we can cross over, why not do some cool crossovers? There have been a number of Wizard of Oz and steampunk crossovers, because Wizard of Oz is just playing not with its era of 1900, but also with the new electricity and how they can cross over it in the original series. So many indies you can find, as so many authors are experimenting with their heroes saving the day in the Old West, in magical kingdoms, mixed with detective fiction, mixed with noir fiction, mixed with history, and out we go. We've got a sequel to War of the Worlds. We've got Scarlet Traces. We've got Steampunk, where the Underdwellers team up to take on the madman who's in charge of all of London, and they, of course, all have their cool powers and their cool tech, and out we go. We've got some more literary superheroes traveling the world and saving the day. Luther Arkwright is popping between dimensions using his powers, their mental powers, precognitive or telepathic, to try to save the day. Adele Blanc-Cinq has a short film, and her French comic has been reprinted, so we can get that too. Janus Stark is a British comic strip from the 70s, but he's a Victorian escapologist who can use his Harry Houdini powers, clearly, to battle crime. And he's kind of an early Fantastic Four character because he's got rubbery bones that aid in his escape artistry. So out he goes. Adam Adamant Lives. If we want to go to TV, admittedly, a lot of the steampunk doesn't automatically fall into superheroes because Wild Wild West, their early Secret Service in spy investigator types, Legend, he's an inventor, which sometimes ties into being a superhero. So there are some great shows we can get a hold of, but a lot of them, they may be investigating, it may be Gothic, they may be doing an early Men in Black thing or a Men in Black thing with some steampunk thrown in. That's, I know Warehouse 13 has gone there. I'm sure there are Legends of Tomorrow episodes that have at least a bit of a Victorian vibe, but when do we get a whole series of Victorian superheroes? Well, if you know the answer, hang on a slide. But Adam Adamant Lives is worth looking up. We have an Edwardian swashbuckler who is fighting crimes and solving mysteries. And yes, this does seem like an Avengers Steed and Peel spin-off as we look at the two of them, but as he's particularly cool because he's an Edwardian, and because he can sword fight, and because he has the old world manners and sensibility, but we team him up with a modern character and bring him into the present day, so we've got it all. And yes, just now, The Nevers has premiered. They get to wear the pretty dresses. They each have a superpower, the women, pretty much. So we're doing X-Men, where everybody has a different power, and like X-Men, these women are the touched, marginalized in society, and the higher-ups the old white men who have all the power, are sitting there judging what is to be done with them, how can they be deprived of their power and persuaded to shut up and go away. So our ladies are out there fighting for their rights. And it explores not just all the fun of gender and class and race, but they're having such fun with their individual powers. And their individual powers also have a lot of mystery and surprise to them, as we learn that the show is not what we thought it was as the season concluded, and there's a lot going on. But if you'd just like to see people invent cool gadgets, pick up some gunpowder and explosive, put on the pretty dresses or working clothes, and go fight crime, this is a delightful one with a deeper story arc. Novels. Yes, there are some great novels. The Society of Steam is set in New York, I think it was, and they make their team and out they go to help right wrongs. The Girl in the Steel Corset, she has Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome, and a steel corset she can bounce bullets off of, she hopes. And she too is on a team where everybody has a different power, some of them rooted in, well, I suppose all of them rooted in the ether that gives them their magic and semi-magic powers. And it's a very diverse team that all have different issues and problems going on. So I was really struck by The Girl in the Steel Corset, where everybody had different issues and a different arc going that they all have to solve. And now we reach DC Comics. DC Comics had fun with its Elseworlds, because let's face it, the modern era has been done to death, but when they start doing what if all these characters existed in a different time, in a different place, there's just so much that they can explore and discuss, isn't there? Well, Gotham by Gaslight is a one-shot, and it discovered, as did many of these, that Bruce Wayne transfers really well to 100 years back. He's already in a Gothic story. He's already got the manor and the brooding. He's already got the cool technology, but the cool technology, Batman was invented in late 30s, early 40s, so his cool technology at the time really was more hang glider and less amazing electronics. So you can absolutely age him back in time. As we can see, we've got a low-tech Mr. Freeze, and the other ones fit really well into the Gothic with the proper buttoned-up suits and the madness, and the corsets for that matter, and out we go. So, again, a perfect fit, and the first Elseworlds story that showed that we can do so many more of these and take our heroes to all kinds of different times. As with a lot of these, this one was invented before the concept of steampunk as itself had really caught on, but so many of these work really well for just honorary steampunk credit. So let's try some other times. What if Superman landed in the 1850s and was introduced at the Centennial Exposition of 1876? That's a popular one for steampunk because so many cultures were coming together and showing off all the cutting-edge technology of the world in 1876, and America was very hopeful with the Centennial. They'd existed for 100 years and had so much potential. So it gets easy to throw in some cooler, more risque tech, or in this case, superheroes. Out they come, recognizable in their new outfits. And also getting political, as Green Arrow here, dressed even more Robin Hoody than usual, realizes that factory workers are the new peasants of the society who are oppressed and need a hero to come and save them. So, of course, that's what you get whenever you do these retro comics, fun with the politics of the time and questions about how they reflect our politics today. We can do some other eras, can't we? Let's do Batman at the turn of the century with wealthy industrialists doing railroad monopolies, and let's take this railroad worker who is poor and oppressed and puts on a bat costume to lead a strike. There he is up top. Admittedly, they had to change the metaphor quite a bit, because if Batman is not a rich person out fighting crime, but a poor person fighting crime, that is a different message, and now we're doing something of a different story, but all right. Arkham Asylum is already so gothic, so primitive, so Victorian, with everybody's worst fears all bottled up in a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde way, where if we just lock up all the Mr. Hyde stuff and push it aside, we can be moral, sure, can't we? In fact, Arkham Asylum has also always seemed very bedlam, sanatorium, just brings us back to the Victorian times, where we're not trying to psychologically treat people, we're just locking them away because they're so monstrous and frightening. So, moving Arkham Asylum a century back really works. Superman, what if we made him a Union soldier? What would that do to his fight for truth and justice? What if we took John Henry and made the superhero Steel fighting as a slave who wants his rights, but he has superpowers? That could be one of the more interesting ones. Today, in the Own Voices era, I've seen a number of stories dealing with slavery and colonization, and can we tell some stories about some people who are not the privileged people in the mansions this time, and what happens when they get the superpowers, and how do they decide to use them, and what is the punishment for having superpowers in this society? Likewise, Green Lantern is already so magical that we can really make him retro, can't we? And sure, let's just take the Justice League and make these different people with all their different goals and priorities and powers riders in the Old West. When you try asking the what if questions, you sometimes find these fit very well indeed. Another thing, of course, you can do with the retro stories is team-ups. Well, who was cool and around in the historical times that we'd like to team our hero with? What if Batman bumped into Houdini and they started trading tips about what it's like to be an escape artist with locks, with technology, with hidden little gadgets everywhere to make their stuff work, because that's who Houdini was. And while we're at it, let's take Houdini's trick of touring seances to debunk them, but discover that there's really something supernatural and gothic and creepy happening in Gotham of 1907. Of course, Houdini can mentor mentor Batman and teach him to improve his lock-picking and escapology skills. Why not? What if we took Wonder Woman in her cool outfit but aged back and send her out into her own steampunk eras? Absolutely. This was a popular one. Batman the Pirate. Sure, he's Leatherwing. He's a privateer working for James II, and he's got his whole team. He's got Robin, He's got the rival pirate queen, Catwoman, and out they go. There were a few of these, I think. What if we put him in the French Revolution? Now, this is amusing because if anybody's read The Scarlet Pimpernel, that actually is the original steampunk superhero. Perhaps the original superhero on which a number of these are based. And if you haven't read The Scarlet Pimpernel or seen the movie, they're delights. Absolutely go for it. The Scarlet Pimpernel is an English lord who sneaks into the French Revolution, or the guillotines following the French Revolution, and rescues French aristocrats before they can be guillotined using his powers. He's a master of disguise. He's got all the lock picks and some clever little bits of tech. He's a good sword fighter, but he is just so fun as he leaves snarky little over polite notes for the opposition, the police chief who's determined to catch him. And he's just so smooth. Every lady in England is in love with him, including this lady who is absolutely obsessed but hates her husband because he's just a lazy dork and never seems to go out and do anything, and is a spoiled rich boy, and we can probably guess where this is going. Anyway, Scarlet Pimpernel rocks. Takes place, well, in the French Revolution. It's historical fiction. But if he's the inspiration for Batman, then going back and casting Batman as the Scarlet Pimpernel or his competitor, we're absolutely going full circle and making a big loop here. Or heck, he's got the wings. How far back can we put him? Maybe with the inventions of primitive wings. Leonardo da Vinci's apprentice takes out his master's hang glider and fights crime. Sure. I think the Gothic Victorian ones work best, but there's more eras, of course. Let's team up Batman and Tarzan. Clearly the picture there is Superman and Tarzan. Let's team them up too. What if Superman was adopted by the apes and grew up in the jungle and fought for the right of the creatures there? Sure. Let's set Batman against Lovecraft monsters in the 1920s. And that with the horror and the creepiness and the monstrousness and the, dark spookiness seems to fit better than some of these. Let's do War of the Worlds with Superman. I mean, we've got an alien invasion, but in 1938, sure, how would Superman deal with that? Let's do a Frankenstein reimagining. As I said, all these old stories are past copyright. Okay, what if Bruce Wayne revived his father and put him in a bat costume, and then had to sit around and suffer as his father in the bat costume is committing crimes and he can't say who did it and his guilt is eating him up? On the one hand, the guilt over the father's suffering is absolutely popped right in here. On the other hand, this is no longer Batman and Bruce are the same person and he's having issues about it. This is his creation has run amok, as with original Frankenstein, and he's suffering because of it. Let's try a different take. What if Victor Luther makes a monster, Kal-El, but the monster is the ethical one, as with original Frankenstein, whereas Luther is the mad scientist, as with Superman, of course. So again, the question keeps coming up, are we flipping? Are we authentic to the source material's general goals and missions? Are we adding new insights, new psychology? Or are we just exploiting the fact that Frankenstein has name recognition and is past copyright? They did a whole big series where Batman, who I said was very adaptable into Gothic, does all the Gothics they can get their hands on. Let's do Phantom of the Opera. And who's the evil monster behind the mask? Well, it's Two-Face, who is scarred and obsessed and dealing with his issues with the madness coming out this way. Let's do Jekyll and Hyde. Well, that's ironic because, of course, Batman already is a bit Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, Two-Face even more. But Batman, we absolutely see these issues of, during the daylight, I'm the nice guy, but at night, my dark side goes out in a mask and terrorizes people in a scary bat outfit and throws punches and takes punches and does all the violent stuff that daylight me wouldn't want to do. Well, this time we throw in Joker as Batman's dark side, which that does work psychologically. A lot of people would say that one is a reflection of the other. And let's throw in Two-Face too, and the monsters are taking over the psyche. Batman versus Dracula. Very popular. There was a whole trilogy of it, and again, who do you send in to deal with the darkest of forces in the dark, spooky Gotham? Well, you send somebody with some darkness and savagery in his own soul. And while we're at it, we can do the island of Dr. Moreau, where all of our superheroes are actually animalistic superheroes. And for some like Cheetah, this is very easy to do. Cheetah, well, that's the Flash as Cheetah. But when you look at some characters that already exist, like Cheetah, the Wonder Woman villainess, you see that some of them are actually very close to Dr. Moreau's experiments, especially if you read Cheetah's backstory in some of the comics. So again, it gets very circular when ones that were inspired by some of these stories end up going back and redoing these stories. DC Bombshells. That was fun and interesting. I don't know that it did the feminism that well, but it's arguable. So, what if the superheroines are doing their thing during World War II, which is ironic because that's when they were actually invented in many cases, and what if basically no men have superpowers, only the women have superpowers, and you will notice that this is all about the fun 40s outfits. This started as art before they got the stories in there. So we do, in fact, have some very fun outfits, and I've seen many of these cosplayed, of course, and we see them dealing with the technology they had at the time, even as they play with, well, let's make this one a pilot, and let's make Batwoman an actual baseball player, and let's make Stargirl and Supergirl, I think it was, sister entertainers from Russia, and so on. And of course, we just had steampunk covers for fun and beauty, but they didn't match the interiors. There is so much cosplay, of course, of certainly people can be any of the small stories I described, but mostly people just mash up as they desire superhero and steampunk. And of course, so many of these are so recognizable, and we're accustomed to seeing Batman top hats and so on and so forth. The dealers have so many clever ideas for these. And again, they're fun because they're original, but they're recognizable. And now we're going to the other side of the fence and finding Marvel. And here's some more lovely cosplay that people are putting together of whatever they want to do. Oops, wrong bullet point there, my mistake. And let's look at some Marvel comics. Logan actually is a 19th century character. James Howlett grows up the son of rich landowners, and he's attacked, and his claws are up, and we see his origin story that he's actually Victorian. And there was this delightful moment in Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men Torn where everybody's having what appears to be mental breakdowns, and then it appears that it's revealed the villain is responsible, sure. And the villain is breaking them down to earlier selves and finding their weaknesses. And here is Wolverine as not just Victorian, but a Victorian wimp who is absolutely freaking out, having encountered the Beast who attacked him because the Beast has lost his mind too. He's turned into a beast, as one might expect. And here he is in the tree, freaking out and praying that he will be virtuous always and do good deeds and help poor people unless you don't like them for some reason, and that's why they're poor. As I've said, you can get a lot of social justice discussion in these steampunk comics when you look at other eras and talk about ours. Marvel's Runaways, Joss Whedon again. Runaways is a delightful Hulu TV show and comic book from Marvel where they're a bunch of teens in LA. They discover that their parents are supervillains and they go out on their own and become runaways. Well, in Joss Whedon's arc, they travel back in time to 1907 and discover what it was like to be a teenager runaway in 1907 and a superhero, which is very different from what they're used to. So, of course, they've all got their different cool powers, and out they go. And in the past, they discover how women were treated and teenagers were treated and so forth. But they also get to play with the cool technology and team up with the heroes of the past, and it's a delightful momentary jaunt. A pretty recent story, well, 2008, is Marvel's The 12. And in this, it acknowledges how superhero stories really started in the 40s and have evolved so much since then that even when we have the same characters like Superman and Batman, there are storylines and phrases and things like that that they absolutely don't use now because that was so dated and so awkward and we wish it hadn't happened in time. Well, what if we actually, said J. Michael Straczynski, who wrote Babylon 5 and Sense8 and a bunch of those, what if we woke up some of the 40s heroes, took them out of frozen storage, and what if they absolutely are products of their eras, and we've got, you know, sexist ones and racist ones, but also ones that were hiding their minority differences because they knew they wouldn't be accepted. And what if they have terrible secrets and terrible shame about all the things that they had to keep hidden in order to make it in the 40s? And this isn't just the jokes about not knowing what a computer is and stuff. Their culture is absolutely jarring with ours in the present in a fascinating way that tells us a lot about our culture. Currently, I mean. Battleworld. Well, if we've got a bunch of different realms that have been designed to be a realm where this happens and a realm where that happens, then we're just doing Elseworlds, aren't we? And off they go. We've got a Wild West place in Battleworld. So we've got the Wild West aesthetic and all of our heroes are out again. Let's do England of King James. He's freaked out about witches and terrified about witches. So let's take Angela, who is Thor's sister, and make her a witch hunter, says Neil Gaiman. And we've got all these retro heroes hanging out with, yes, the giant rough collars and the Shakespearean language. What if we did noir and took, again, the darker, more gothic guys? Spider-Man noir, Daredevil noir. Let's take the darker, more cynical characters, all right, Dark Spider-Man, and put this in a darker 30s world. Of course, continuing with our retro TV, we've got Agent Carter, the spin-off of the Marvel's movies and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It all takes place in the same universe, and this is post-World War II. She has lost Captain America, although I guess in Marvel What If we're going to see what if she was Captain America, but she's got the cool gadgets. So we're doing some spy story, but the fact that it's taking place in the superhero world with all the cool gadgets certainly gives it a steampunk feel. This one went for 2 seasons and was a lot of fun. And of course, we've still got more of these superheroes going all the time, so keep an eye out. There are so many more great stories we can enjoy. And along with the image of the Boston Metaphysical Society there, I've got a couple of my books about superheroes and superheroines. I've also written a bunch of books about Joss Whedon, for that matter, though not on the Nevers yet. And it's absolutely worth just searching the web for steampunk superheroes because there's more of this stuff coming every day. Novels, movies, and of course, all those indie comics where there's so much great stuff out there. And thank you.